In the lands of Roman Europe, the pinnacle strategy board game is that of chess, where each player is interested in defeating the army of the opposing player and to essentially capture the enemy king. But in Confucian Asia, the pinnacle strategy board game is that of Go, where the objective of each player isn't to slay the enemy army, but to claim dominance of the territory. What use is an army if it has no land to protect or dominate? Greetings and welcome to Checkpoint Gaming. With this 2-episode series, we will be going over how to play the game Go. With Go, it is a tabletop strategy territorial control board game that was first documented during the 4th century BCE, although there is the possibility it made its first appearance a century earlier. With the name of Go, it is Japanese in origin and is known as Weigi in China and Baduk in Korea. And though it originated from China, it was in Japan that it saw it reach its high level of mastery. This not only shows the value and importance of cultural exchange, but also the fact that things can advance outside their place of origin without the threat of social cancellation. With its introduction to Japan, it occurred around 735 CE, where the game really began to flourish, first appearing within the Japanese imperial court before spreading throughout the country as a whole. So those of noble birth can play a game that is also enjoyed by those who regularly use a hoe. It eventually reached the point where the shogunate would award stipends to the 4 greatest Go players within Japan, a tradition that started in 1612. As time progressed, these stipends would see themselves be handed down from one generation to the next, almost as if this stipend was a part of the player's property and thus be seen as part of the player's estate that would be bequeathed upon the player's death. But with this bequeathment, it only got passed down to the strongest student of the game connected with that given estate. And it was because of this intergenerational stipend that led to the formation of the 4 great schools of Go, that of Honinbo, Hayashi, Inoue, and Yasue, with Honinbo being the most successful of the 4. With the formation of these schools, it led to 250 years of intense competition between them due to improvements in tactics and play standards, along with a ranking system being established. With this ranking system, it would classify professional players into 9 grades, with the highest grade being that of Meijin, or expert in Japanese, which was only held by a single individual at a time and was awarded to said player who outclassed his contemporaries. And yes, we do mean his here, since the socio-cultural value of equality between the sexes didn't exist at the time, nor did said concept really begin to gain traction, at least in the West, until the mid-20th century. But this golden age of professional Go came to an end in 1868, when the shogunate collapsed, the emperor restored to power, and the Go schools defunded as Japan began to westernize. Today, as of the writing of this episode, the main professional organization of Go within Japan is that of Nihon Ki-in, which works alongside the International Go Federation as a means of encouraging the playing of Go around the world. And though the game has a lot of variance to it, its core mechanics have essentially remained unchanged. With the nature of Go and the logic that is needed to play, it can be compared to that of chess. Although both games require skill, Go is much more complicated and requires greater thinking due to move combinations that are available for each player to make. And though analytical skills are needed to play, Go will allow the players to rely upon both experience and intuition in order to win a match. With the popularity of Go, it sees the greatest level of interest in Japan, China, Korea, and Taiwan, with interest in the game emerging in Europe and the United States about a century ago as of the writing of this episode. In the aforementioned Asian countries, they maintain a community of professional players with major tournaments occurring there that draws sponsorships, news coverage, and attention comparable to major sports in the West. Regarding its spread within Europe, it was assisted by a book written by Oskar Korschelt in 1880 that focused upon the game. Because of this book, it led to Go being played within Germany and Yugoslavia. But it wasn't until 1957 that the first regular championship tournament was held in Europe that the game was able to spread across the continent. And though European play was below that of what was found in the East, at least in the beginning, this gap began to shrink as European players spent more time playing the game and improving their skills. With the playing of Go, it is done so upon a board that possesses a grid pattern of 19 by 19 lines, creating a total of 361 intersections, with this design being tournament standard. When it comes to that of each of these intersections, they are known as points, with adjacent intersections consisting of those that are connected by lines upon the board in the aforementioned grid pattern. With the pattern of the intersections, they're measured from the corners of the board, along the edge of the board, and the center of the board. And when we say center of the board, we mean any part of the board that isn't found at the board's corners or edges. In principle, the Go board possesses a square design to it, but with the Japanese version, it is rectangular in shape with it being slightly longer than it is wide. With that said, boards of varying sizes can also be used, thus allowing them to be something other than that of tournament standard with the game's basic mechanics remaining unaffected. And when playing the game, it is done from the perspective of playing off of the intersections instead of within the squares. With each of these intersections, they're known as dian, and 9 of these dian are in possession of a small circle, causing them to be known as star points. With the star point that is found at the center of the board, it is known as the tianyuan. The aim of the game is to see 2 players try to control as much territory as possible, with one player being white and the other player being black, with the black player always going first. When it comes to that of gameplay, the rules will vary slightly between countries, and since we pulled from a few different rule sets, there will be some variety present in this episode. Once the black player has placed their first stone upon the board, the players will alternate taking turns with each turn, seeing said player playing a single stone at one of the available dian. And once a stone has been played, it cannot be moved. This also means that no stone is allowed to be shoved or jumped. It is only when the stone gets captured that it is to be removed from the board. And in order to be captured, the stones will have to be surrounded, leading them to become prisoners for the opposing player. It is worth noting that when it comes to that of groups, pieces found diagonally don't count as part of said group due to them not being connected. On top of this, when stones engage in capturing, they don't need to be part of a group, meaning that they don't have to be in a diagonal position in relation to the captured stone. This allows them to be in separate groups and still engage in capturing. With a group, it consists of 2 or more stones that are found in a continuous line either along the horizontal or vertical axis, and a group is able to be made larger by the controlling player by adding additional stones to it, and the larger the group is, the harder it will be for the opposing player to capture it. When it comes to that of eyes, they consist of 1 or more vacant intersections found within a group of stones that belong to a single player, where it would be illegal for either player to place one of their stones. Building off of this, when it comes to that of living groups, they consist of groups that possess 2 or more eyes to them, almost as if the board, and thus the game itself, is watching you. Maybe it's even secretly judging you. Who knows? On top of this, living groups are permanently safe from capture since the other player is unable to capture any stones due to the lack of liberties available to them. But with all of that said, a group shouldn't be too small or compact where it would be possible for the opposing player to take said group. On top of this, the group shouldn't be so large that it would allow the opposing player to maintain themselves within said group, not unlike that of Lesotho, which is an enclave of South Africa, or the Vatican, which is an enclave of Italy. And though a player has the right to play a stone on their turn, they also have the option to pass, giving up their right to play a piece on that turn. But with that said, this doesn't typically occur until late in the game. With some game versions, the player who passed will have to give their opponent a stone as a prisoner. At the start of the game, the board stands empty with it becoming increasingly occupied as the game progresses due to piece placement. This means that no stones are placed into any specific position during the course of the game, with each piece being played based upon player judgment. The only exception to this is if the handicap system is being implemented for the game in question. Each player is given a group of pieces that are known as stones, with their design having one side being round and the other side being flat, resembling a semicircular sphere. And when the stones are placed upon the board, they're done flat side down because of course they would. Although it is possible for players to use square stones, it will be inconvenient to do so since it would be difficult to remove them from the board during gameplay. But the advantage of square stones is that they're visually distinct when they are found upon adjacent intersections. Although the stones can be any 2 distinct colors, tournament standard is that of black and white. At the start of the game, each player should have enough stones at their disposal to play a complete game. Hypothetically speaking, this number is infinite, but when it comes to that of tournaments, each player is to possess 180 total stones. It is worth noting that with a standard set, it typically comes with that of 361 total stones, with 181 of them being black and 180 of them being white. With that said, there is the possibility that each player's stone count may not be enough due to capturing and removal from the board during gameplay. So if both players are running low on the number of stones they have to use, they have the possibility to exchange the same number of stones with their opponent as a means of continuing the game. This can be seen as a prisoner exchange between countries, such as what occurred between the United States and the Soviet Union at the Glyanica Bridge in 1962, where these two superpowers exchanged William Fisher and Gary Powers. But if only one player faces the threat of running low on stones, then said player will tend to resign before they experience said stone shortage due to said player realizing that they have essentially lost. With the traditional construction of the stones, white was made from clamshells, while black was made from black rock, with each stone being ground down into their playable shapes. But with modern stones, at least as of the writing of this episode, they're made out of glass, although plastic is also an option. Although the standard size of the stones are to be 2.21 centimeters in diameter, the ideal size for the stones is for them to fit nicely within any square found upon the board. Basically speaking, the stones will need to match the size of the board that is being used. When it comes to the storing of the stones, they are typically kept in a large container with each player possessing one of them. Each container also comes with a lid that is to be kept upside down during gameplay as a means of storing all enemy stones that were captured during the game. Since the Chinese version of the game ignores the capturing of stones, the Chinese containers don't come with a lid. If only Beautiful Women did the same and came without a top. With the game's objective, it is to score more points than the opposing player by controlling more of the board, which is achieved by surrounding and dominating different areas, accompanied by capturing the opponent's stones. The greater number of vacant intersections found within a player's territory will help contribute to said player winning the game. And with conquered parts of the board, they consist of the stones that have been placed upon it, plus any stones that are able to be safely added within the walls of a player's controlled area. When it comes to that, of any unoccupied points that are found immediately adjacent to a group along the vertical or horizontal axis, they are known as a liberty. So a single stone possesses 4 liberties by default unless it is placed into a corner or along the board's edge, causing them to be reduced accordingly. And in regard to a group, they share their liberties. But if the opponent has placed one of their stones into one of these intersections, then said liberty no longer exists. If a player manages to occupy all of the liberties that are found in and around an opponent's stone or group, then said stone or group has been captured and removed from the board. And since an entire group is treated as a single unit, all of their associated stones are removed when all of their liberties are gone. So with the capturing of stones, the points that formerly occupied the captured stones have become the territory of the opposing player. When placing a stone upon a point, the player is not allowed to do so if the player's stone or group doesn't possess any liberties. So if all of the liberties are to vanish for said stone once it is played, then said player is forbidden from placing their stone there. With this given intersection, it is known as a forbidden intersection. The exception to this, because there's always an exception, is if placing said stone would result in the capturing of the opponent's stone or group. It is worth noting that the exact same board position is not allowed to be repeating, thus preventing perpetual attacks from occurring. Regarding this perpetual attack, it is known as Go, which means eternity in Japanese. So basically speaking, World War I trench warfare is not allowed within Go. So due to game design, players aren't allowed to engage in an endless action of capturing their opponent's stone within the same area of the board. But when the opposing player plays a stone elsewhere on the board, then the initial player is allowed to place one of their stones back onto the point that was previously deemed illegal due to the board having been altered in some capacity. With all of that said, there is also something that is known as a co-threat. This occurs when a player doesn't want their opponent to place one of their stones within a certain area of the board, thus leading the initial player to try and distract their opponent for a single move before engaging in a recapture. It is also worth noting that a player doesn't have to worry about losing a co as long as they obtain enough compensation for a co-threat. And for those who might find the idea of the co-threat confusing, don't worry, for game experience will help mitigate this. Just play the game so that understanding can occur. When it comes to that of dead stones, which are also known as hopeless stones, they consist of any stone or group that are fated to be captured at some point during the game but are yet to be completely surrounded, including any group that is unable to make at least 2 eyes. These stones are as good as captured, but the opposing player has yet to deprive them of their liberties. But with that said, the opposing player isn't obligated to completely capture these dead stones, thus not needing to deprive the dead stones of their final liberty. In this case, these dead stones are to remain upon the board as prisoners. A reason behind this can be due to the other player wanting to perform moves elsewhere upon the board. And though both players will typically agree that dead stones are to be removed from the board, if the players are unable to agree upon the situation, then they're to continue playing until all of the dead stones have actually been captured, or they reach an agreement on which stones count as dead stones. And when the game comes to an end, all dead stones are to be removed from the board, while all stones that aren't removable are to be classified as living stones. It will also be illegal for a player to engage in suicide or to repeat a board position. With suicide, or a suicidal move, in the confines of the game, is when a player places one of their stones onto an intersection that is without any liberties, thus causing it to be immediately captured. So basically speaking, players can't capture themselves or to sacrifice a piece to their opponent. With the capturing of pieces, it is when one of the players sees a stone or group that belongs to them be completely surrounded by their opponent's stones. Though typically bad, there are times when sacrificing a stone or group can be advantageous. And if one player places a stone that sees a situation arise where its placement eliminates all liberties for both players, then the player who plays said stone will have essentially captured their opponent's stones. This is because when a suicide and a killing occur simultaneously, the killing action will precede the suicide due to the player's stone not being suffocated at the moment their opponent's stones are removed from the board. With the surrounding of an area found upon the board, if a stone is standing alone, or there are several connected stones in the form of a continuous horizontal or vertical line, they are considered to be a single group, but with stones that are oriented diagonally, they are considered to be a part of a different group. There is also the chance that an impasse, or C-key, can occur. With a C-key, it is basically when a situation arises where neither player dares to make a move upon a given part of the board. Although the stone groups might appear to be dead, since neither player is capable of engaging in such action due to the risk, neither player will play a stone. This is why such patterns are left unmolested and the space found in contention remains unclaimed. So it can be seen as a local stalemate occurring upon said part of the board. And if a player feels like there isn't any more territory that is worth disputing, then said player is allowed to pass. With gameplay, there are 3 ways that it can come to an end. First is if both players agree that they have finished placing their stones. Second is when one player resigns during the game. And third is when both players pass one after the other. With the first and third options, they are done when it is most likely due to the territory of the board being divided between the players, thus preventing either player from claiming any additional territory or the capturing of enemy stones. So basically, the game reached the point where it is disadvantageous to continue playing pieces. This would be because playing stones into one's own territory would cost said player points, while playing stones within enemy territory would give thine enemy prisoners. With that of passing, players will usually do so when there are no more chances for them to further claim territory or to engage in attacks against the opposing player. And when both players pass in a consecutive manner, the game comes to an end. But with that said, some variants of the game require that the white player be the last player to pass, which will see the consecutive pass sequence be that of 3 instead of 2. However, we prefer the consecutive pass sequence be 2 instead of 3, since forcing the initial passing player to pass again doesn't serve a purpose in our eyes. Passing once is good enough. It is also at this point that any hopeless strings are to be removed from the board and become prisoners of the opposing player. But if the players can't agree if a string is dead or alive, then play is to continue until said string is either captured or is confirmed to be alive. At the end of the game, the score is to be tallied, and depending upon the scoring system being used, it will influence how scoring is to be performed. We'll share the means by which points can be scored here based upon the research that we conducted. And since we pulled from a number of different sources, all the information that we share here won't necessarily mean that it'll be implemented within the game being played. We just want to share said information. Each player is to score 1 point for every intersection they have surrounded with their given stones. When it comes to any unoccupied intersections that are found between the 2 players' stones, so basically the no man's land intersections, they're to be totaled, divided by 2, and then each player receiving half. From there, once all of the dead stones have been removed from the board, each player is to count their living stones with this value being added to their score. Each player is then to lose 1 point from their score for every stone that the opposing player has captured. A variant to this can be seen with the reduction of the opponent's territory by 1 for every stone that a player has captured from their opponent. With the target point threshold each player is aiming for, it is that of 180.5, which is derived from dividing the number of intersections found upon the board in half. If the player scores more than this threshold, then they win the game, while the player who scores less than this value is the loser. But if both players score the same number of points, then the game ends in a tie. And if a compensation system is being used, it will alter how a winner and loser will be determined. If playing with compensation, which is known as komi in Japanese, then the white player is to receive additional points as a means of compensating for the fact that they went second. The size of the board will have little influence when it comes to that of komi, with professional Go players saying that its value should be that of 5.5, with this value being used upon a 9x9, 13x13, or 19x19 sized board. And it is worth noting that a half a point tends to be included in the komi during a tournament as a means of avoiding draws. It is also possible for the value of the komi to vary between countries and even between tournaments. So basically speaking, it is up to the tournament organizers to decide what the komi value is to be. But the players can also just ignore this 180.5 threshold and declare the player with the greatest number of points being the winner, even if their score comes in under this threshold. So regardless of the scoring method being used, the player with the most number of points is deemed the winner. One of the features that is found with the game of Go is that players don't need to possess comparable experience in order for the game to be exciting. This is achieved through the implementation of a handicap system, which is normal for the game of Go, and is done by equalizing the chances of both players winning by the means of adding some initial stones to the board. The greater the difference between experience each player possesses, the more stones are to be added to the board. With these initially placed stones, they are known as handicap stones. The advantage the weaker player is to receive will range from 2 through 9, with the method used for determining this value being that of the player grading system that allows them to determine the different experience levels each player possesses. This, in turn, determines the number of handicap stones the weaker player is to receive as compensation. This is done through each grade being measured in terms of stones, with the weaker player receiving handicap stones equal to the stronger player's grade minus the weaker player's grade. The reason why 2 is the minimum number of handicap stones is because when the black player places their first stone upon the board during a normal game, they have an advantage of 1 stone over white. This essentially gives them a stronger position due to them dictating where the white player is to place their first stone by forcing them to play anywhere except for where the black player placed their initial stone. So as a means of counteracting this, but still acknowledging the value and importance of black's first move, is why the handicap player gets to place a minimum of 2 handicap stones upon the board. When implementing the handicap system, the star points are to be used as a means of determining where the handicap stones are to be placed. Typically speaking, the stronger player is to give a handicap to the weaker player by allowing the weaker player to place a few stones onto the board using predetermined star points as dictated by the handicap level. But regardless of what the handicap level is, the weaker player is to be the black player and is to place the handicap stones upon the designated star points as determined by the handicap level. And with the placement of the handicap stones upon the board, it counts as black's first turn of the game. Once the handicap stones have been placed in their designated star points, the game is to proceed normally, with the white player placing one of their stones on any point that they desire, followed by black doing the same on their subsequent turn. With the implementation of the handicap system, it consists of the following as measured from the perspective of the black player. With a handicap of 2, the handicap stones are to be placed into the upper right and lower left star points. With a handicap of 3, the handicap stones are to be placed into the upper right, lower left, and lower right star points. With a handicap of 4, the handicap stones are to be placed into the upper right, upper left, lower right, and lower left star points. With a handicap of 5, the handicap stones are to be placed into the upper right, upper left, lower right, and lower left star points, as well as the Tianyuan. With a handicap of 6, the handicap stones are to be placed into the upper right, upper left, center left, lower right, and lower left star points. With a handicap of 7, the handicap stones are to be placed into the 3 right star points, the 3 left star points, and the Tianyuan. With a handicap of 8, the handicap stones are to be placed into all of the star points except for the Tianyuan. And with a handicap of 9, the handicap stones are to be placed into all 9 star points. With all of that taken care of, let's take a look at some variants. First, we have pair Go, which consists of 4 players divided into 2 teams of 2 players each, causing it to also be referred to as doubles. Although these teams can consist of any type of pairing when it comes to sex, when it consists of one male and one female player, it is known as mixed doubles. During play, each player of a team is to perform a single move upon the board in an alternating manner. Players are also forbidden from conferring with their teammates during play. And though some venues require a special etiquette when it comes to manner and attire, even given awards out because of it, pair Go can also be played in a less formal manner at other tournaments and clubs. Second, we have Chain Go, which sees a large gathering of people who are divided into two teams play a game of Go upon a single board. Once the teams have been formed, one member from each team is to perform a move when it's their team's turn to do so, followed by leaving the board once they have placed a piece. This is to continue until each member of a team has taken a turn placing a piece onto the board. And when a game is finished, no winner or loser is declared, since this version of the game is just meant purely for entertainment purposes. So think of it as just a party game version of Go. So with that said, that is what you need to know about how to go about playing the game Go. With that taken care of, we can start talking about tournament play. If you liked this episode, feel free to give it a like, and if you want to stay up to date on any future episodes we upload, go ahead and subscribe. You can also support us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/checkpointgaming. See you in the next episode, and happy gaming.